Seeking 6. Last one, I said, tossing an apple down from the tree. Wild apple trees were never great, and honestly I wouldn't be giving them crab apples if I had a choice. But they needed something different after the endless nuts of the last few days. Everyone eating? I asked as I scrambled down. Everyone except Roger. Little Sam's trying, but... Cassandra said, trailing off and grimacing. The last 4 days of dragging the civilians back the way we came, moving half the speed Caden and I had made and having to stop far too often for their benefit, had been horrible. Just keeping them on track, not losing anyone, namely Roger, was bad enough. But they were malnourished, their clothes worn, and all of them had been traumatized by the gnolls. Cassandra was the one coping the best of all of them, which wasn't saying much. All you can do is try, I said. Horrible as it was, there wasn't anything I could do for him. I might have a better idea of how to help with mental health issues than anyone else on Azeroth from my own experience from before, but I didn't have the time, nor the willingness, to dedicate myself to babysitting a grown man. I'd healed his physical wounds, removed any trauma to his head, but he still blankly followed when led, only ate when forced to. A dead man walking since he had watched his son get eaten alive for trying to run. Cassandra nodded, tears sprinkling at her eyes again. One piece of advice I had given her was to take him to a priest. They, the light, might well be able to give him a new purpose, to help give him peace. Nothing I knew about nature could. I best check on Kat, she said, hurrying off with the apples. She was hiding her tears as she had done each day, and treating me much like she did the 2 children, as someone who needed protecting from the realities of what had happened. In many ways I wished it was working, that I could hide away from it, but even the 2 kids knew better, though they played into it, for her benefit as much as their own. With feeding everyone for the day dealt with, I wandered over to Caden. I wasn't enjoying having to handle so many people, to look after them so directly, but they saw Caden as a distant heroic figure who saved them. We both heard the kids whispering in awe, Cassandra telling them the gnolls wouldn't come back, and even if they did, he'd smack their heads in again. Featherstone was the same. They'd seen those 2 in action. From their point of view, I stumbled in late, small and injured, and all I did was heal everyone. A follower for the mighty dwarven hero. Hey, I said, dropping onto the ground next to my dwarven friend. You've eaten, right? Caden nodded. Aye. He was watching over the camp, Featherstone taking a deserved nap beside him. We'd briefly discussed sending at least the kids on ahead on Griffinback, ferrying everyone along one by one, but it wasn't feasible. The risk of someone panicking in the air and getting hurt, or worse, falling, was high. Even higher if Caden stayed behind. And if Caden went with them, not only would it be less people per trip, finding our little group again would be near impossible. The bond the 2 shared meant they could find each other anywhere. A bunch of humans lost in the woods? Not so much. How much farther is the road? Not too far. I'd be betting on tomorrow, the day after if we run into trouble, he answered. You doing okay, lass? Tired. Whatever had changed about me in the transition from my last life to this one, my introversion hadn't gone anywhere. Otherwise I'm okay. Nightmares? I flinched, taking a deep breath and shoving aside the dripping bloody X inside my head. Some. They'll pass. I know how to deal with them. Maybe not near-death experience level of personal horror, but it was handleable. I'd certainly been in worse places mentally before. If you need it, I'd be here to listen, he said, patting me on the shoulder affectionately. Smiling faintly, I leaned against the fluffy bulk of Featherstone. I could close my eyes for a bit and not have to worry with them so close. I was the first to notice something off. Not bad off, but the birds stopped singing and started giving out their warning chirps. Intruders! Strangers! A chorus passed through the forest up a chain of songbirds. Not long after, the wind rustled through the trees as well. If not for my recent experience with it, I likely would have dismissed it, focused solely on the sounds of the animals and the wariness of the forest life. But the rustling was peaceful, not of danger, but searching. Informative, not warning. Not long after that, everyone knew. The telltale baying of Gilnean hounds sounding in the distance, following some trail and heading in our direction. No, no! Kat, the young girl, muttered as she clung to Cassandra. Not again. It's hounds, not gnolls. A nobleman's hunting party, most likely. Hunting was a traditional pastime for the nobility, and the hounds were an integral part of that. You heard stories about nobles and their hunts, especially about the bad ones, who thought of poachers as a valid target to hunt. For some reason though, it didn't sound right. Not with what the breeze was trying to tell me. Or... no, there's too many of them for that. I frowned. At some point I needed to figure out what was going on with this. I'd been too busy to take the time to suss out what was going on with the refugees to take care of, but there was no way I was leaving this mystery with the wind alone forever. A while, maybe, but not forever. You think they were looking for us? Little Sam asked. He was riding atop Featherstorm, who had gamely put up with carrying the kids when they got too tired to walk so could move a little faster. Uncle Derek. There was a complicated look on his face, almost ready to burst into tears, but desperately not wanting to. Could be, Caden said, his hand on his storm hammer. Whatever they be out here for, they'll be taking care of you from here, or they'll be answering to me. His words of reassurance did far more for the refugees than mine did, settling in and waiting for the riders to approach. When they finally came into sight through the trees, it was clear it was no simple hunting party. At the head of the group was a houndmaster, but behind him was a knight, a rare sight in Gilneas. Few houses kept the tradition of heavily armored cavalry, and most of the Gilnean forces trained with pike and guns. Ho there! The Groundmaster bellowed, giving us all a gimlet eye. Who's this then? His gaze lingered longer on Caden, a grim frown on his face. His lordship's gonna have questions for you lot. And I'll be having questions for him too, seeing as I be doing Gilneas a favour here, Caden said, returning the man's stare contemptuously. Thane Caden Kindfeather, rider of Airy Peak. The souls behind me are survivors of a raid. Not me business, the Houndmaster scoffed. Not so, Mr. Julian, a stately voice said as trailing horses caught up to the knight, along with a dozen armed soldiers marching beside them. It appears our work has been completed for us. My thanks, Thane Kindfeather. When Mr. Roper made his way to my estate, his horse half dead, with a tale of a monster attack, we feared the worst. He looked out over the refugees, and me, with clear relief on his face. Yet for some reason that has been averted. My men will be sorry to have marched all this way for nothing, yet I can feel nothing but relief to know they have been spared the indignity and suffering days sooner than we might have achieved. If you caught up at all, Caden said, eyeing the soldiers. And he was right, a marching band like that, this far out. The gnolls would have been well and truly in the mountains by the time they caught up, if they even managed to keep the trail. One bad day of rain and it would be gone. They were 4 days' march from here. Slow with hunger it be, but you canna have made a good pace with so many in these woods. Rather than arguing, the noble merely nodded. Sadly true. Yet if Mr. Roper's story of dozens of monsters were true, I could hardly set out with insufficient forces, lest we ourselves become victims. He slid off his horse and started to walk up to us. 10, he said, shaking his head sadly. What manner of beast was it? Gnolls, I replied. Outmaster Julian, if you could quieten your hounds, their barking is bringing back memories for the others. Me dogs, Julian, the noble said, frowning at his man. Listen to the poor girl. Grumbling, the man said to his hounds, shushing them, dragging them further away from the scared villagers and back into the woods. I frowned. Was he thinking? He'd said 10. We rescued 9 people. I'm sorry, your lordship, but I'm not from the village. I was traveling with Caden when we spotted smoke from the village and we tracked him from there. I'm a witch, a nature mage if that is more clear to you, and provided healing and aid during the fight. Really? A young girl said, and I saw that one of the riders who had come up besides the lord was someone my own age. A girl with long black hair. It looked wonderfully taken care of. An artfully done braid hanging over her shoulder without even the faintest sign of fraying, and almost shining despite clearly having been on the road for some time. Her head tilted gently to the side as she looked at me curiously. I thought only priests of the light could heal. Her riding clothes were gorgeous too. Long black boots over white leggings and a sharp black buttoned vest. Seeing how good she looked in them brought to mind how much of a mess I was. Having barely stitched up my shirt from where I had been near cut in half by a red-stained bloody axe, I took a deep breath. My other clothes were on Kat, the poor girl who had been wearing rags. I wasn't happy my clothes were a bloody mess, especially when dealing with nobility, but it wasn't the end of the world. The awkward heat I felt from being such a mess didn't make me happy, though, just uncomfortable. Nah, the girl be good at patching people up. Needs work on learning to fight, but that comes with practice. Did well helping out and killed a gnoll by herself, Caden said, my cheeks warming further at his overly generous praise while the girl clapped. I killed a gnoll by pure dumb luck. The breeze changed a tad and the leaves rustled again. Pure dumb luck and a helping hand I did not understand at all yet. I might be putting too much meaning to the sound of a breeze. It probably hadn't actually been trying to respond to my thoughts. It is good to hear their ailments have been taken care of, the noble said. Might I introduce Lady Crowley, my temporary ward? She insisted on coming. He eyed her with mild disapproval, but she merely raised an eyebrow at him. Which I could hardly refuse, as Dame Tadbury was the greatest combatant available and served as her guard. Tobias, Lady Crowley said sweetly. You forgot to introduce yourself, again. As Tobias's face turned faintly red, she giggled. Well, yes, I am Tobias Mistmantle. My thanks again, Thane Kindfeather, for saving these lost souls. You can thank me by taking care of them, Caden grumbled. Been days now, and I've been gone from home for over a month already. I felt a sinking feeling as he said that, a reminder that Caden wouldn't be around forever. Of course, that was the very reason we came out here. I could hardly leave them behind. Though I shall have to send someone ahead to have my staff prepare for their... Perhaps we can have the good Thane help with that, Lady Crowley interjected. That is, if he is not unwilling. He could reach the manor swiftly enough, given direction, and it would give him chance to recuperate before returning to his journey. I cannot imagine taking care of so many was easy. It weren't, you be right, Caden mumbled, glancing at me. While I'm sure my Isabel would listen well to a Thane's words, perhaps it would be good of you to join him, Lorna, Lord Mistmantle said, rubbing at his clean-shaven shin. That is, if the good... my Thane, what is the name of your griffin? Featherstorm, Caden and I answered at once. Lord Mistmantle nodded. That is, if the good Featherstorm can carry an extra rider. The smile on his face and the way Lady Crowley perked up cutely told me he had sussed out an ulterior motive from her and indulged it. Caden's chuckle said he had seen it too. 2 young lasses won't burden him much, Will it, Ferris? Featherstorm squawked and spread his wings, flapping them gently. Clearly he fought himself up to it. Lord Mistmantle, I must protest, Dame Tadbury said, stepping between Lady Crowley and Featherstorm. I cannot leave my charge alone. Her late mother entrusted me... Hilda, Lorna Crowley said, a firmness in her voice that hadn't been there before. I am riding a griffin. You shall stay here and protect my father's people, as you are sworn to do. That is my order as Marchioness of Banderwood. For a few moments the knight seemed torn, a deep frown settling in and tension building in her frame. Will the knight be going too? The worried voice of little Sam came from behind us. If Master Dwarf is going, then we need a knight. What if the dogmen come back? He whined over Cassandra, trying to shush him. Lady Crowley smiled and Dame Tadbury relaxed. As you wish, my lady, she said, bowing to Lady Crowley. I shall see them safe, and speak of this to your father. Surprisingly, Lady Crowley didn't seem to be concerned by it at all, her smile not fading. Father will understand and agree that our people's needs for protection comes first. That's all settled then? Good, Lord Mistmantle said, something of a wooden smile on his face. Lorna can lead you to my estate, good Thane, if you have no objections. No objections, but one question, Caden said. Oh? Do you have any Thundermar at your estate? I ran out 2 days past. This is incredible! Lady Crowley laughed out behind me, her arms wrapped around my neck as she clung tight. Though she had expressed far more joy than fear so far, there was still some nervousness to her. I knew Featherstone wouldn't let me fall, that the straps would hold. But if she wanted to hold on to me for reassurance, I wasn't complaining in the slightest. She was warm and soft, and the sky was cold and demanding. Is that Amberstone Lake over there? That's miles away! Caden rumbled in amusement, as he had with me, though there was no showing off on this flight like there had been for my first. Featherstorm's confidence in his own ability wasn't entirely unfounded, as he carried the three of us through the air, but I could tell it was a strain on our mighty steed. He was flying more sedately, shifting to take advantage of more updrafts and spending time gliding rather than powering forwards like he did with just Caden and I. Rather than taking in the view, as incredible as it was, I was trying to focus on what I could feel. Here, in the sky, the sound of the wind, the simple presence of the air was all around us, omnipresent. Though I couldn't hear anything myself, like I almost had in the moments before I did, whatever it was I did, there was muffled murmuring. Always right before Caden directed Featherstorm to another updraft. I'd been able to predict the weather after Mama taught me. It felt storms brewing before they came, found the wind and rain peaceful rather than unpleasant. But I'd never thought I would touch on being a shaman. Or were there druid things that dealt with the wind? I couldn't remember. It had all picked up since meeting Caden. I wasn't sure if I should ask him, if I should say anything. You see the road down there? Caden said, calling over the rushing air. If you can, tell Feathers where to head. That's the road to my father's estate. I can see the bridge over the Glad Stream. Lady Crowley yelled back, right into my ear. Northglade should be... Oh, where is it? Oh, there! She leaned into me more heavily, stretching over my shoulders to point out a fortification overlooking a small town. That's the castle! It looks so small! Without another word, we swerved in the air, turning for the place. As we got closer, I saw it really was a castle. An old and slightly worn down stone wall set atop a hill, houses and workshops built inside. The town was just spillover from the castle, the population too large to fit inside. Unusual would be the best way to describe it. Most nobles had manners, but then I had spent all but the recent days of my life deep in the interior of Gilneas, and this was part of the last line of defense for our nation. Featherstone flew once around the castle and hill before gliding down towards the front gate. The few sentries on the walls, more watching the road than the sky, were startled but didn't sound any alarms. It was clear they were moving to inform people, but there wasn't any sense of urgency or emergency in the way they moved. A well-dressed lady with bright red hair and a younger girl who couldn't be much past her 10th birthday stood at the head of a gathered party of servants and guards as we landed. "Vivi!" Lady Crowley cried, trying to slip off of Featherstorm's back only to get tangled up in the harness. It didn't deter her from grinning wildly and waving at her friend. "I got to ride a griffin!" "I can see that!" Vivi yelled back, about to lift her skirts as if to run forward, when the lady clicked her tongue. She scowled, shooting the lady a glower, before crossing her arms and pouting. Though it was clear she was still staring at Featherstorm and Caden with undisguised curiosity. The woman looked like she was repressing a sigh as she stepped forward with what must have been the Mistmantler's butler at her side. "Sir Wildhammer, I see you have my husband's ward with you. I trust nothing went amiss on his trip?" "Nah," Caden said, shaking his head. "He be returning with the survivors in tow, wishing you lot to be ready for them when they come. 9 in all, 2 kids, 2 men and 5 women, all hale in body at least thanks to the lass here." He nudged me gently. "That is good to hear," Lady Mistmantle nodded. "Jacob, if you would see to it," she said to the butler, who bowed and moved to start giving orders, before turning back to Caden. "How long do you believe they will be?" 3 days or so, Lady Isabel," Lady Crowley said, still struggling with her straps. I turned to help her with them after quickly handling my own. "We were a day's march into the woods and a little over a day on the road. Giving more time for those less able to travel makes 3 days what I believe likely." "Thank you, Lorna," Lady Mistmantle smiled. "Now, how might I accommodate you, Sir Wildhammer?" "Me clan's Kindfeather, your ladyship," Caden grumbled as he dropped to the ground with a thump. "And I nae be a sir. Thane Caden Kindfeather, rider a Airy Peak." "My apologies, good Thane," she said, somewhat stiffly. "The stable should—" "Do your people know how to take care of a griffin?" he asked pointedly. "I do." A young man raised his hand, then turned red. That is, I do, Thane Kindfeather. I was his lordship's page during the war, and I got to spend time taking care of a griffin or 2 along with the horses. Got some sand to help preen his feathers with somewhere, if he'd be wanting that." Featherstorm crooned softly, clearly liking that idea. Lady Mistmantle didn't look happy about the interruption, from either of them. There was a dourness to the smile she was forcing. "Good to hear. Maybe I know some of them, fought in the war myself along with me brother. Might come by to chat later and swap stories," Caden said, a tinge of curiosity in his voice. "Yet lords promised me Fundamar ale, and it's best drunk with friends. Oh, and Feathers likes rabbit over anything else, if you've got any." "Can do, Thane. My cousin in town keeps some buns. I'll nip down this evening." The man grinned, and with far more confidence than I expected, walked up and started helping Featherstorm out of his harness. "Let's get you comfortable. If you've saved some folk, you deserve it. You great big lord of the sky, you." Caden seemed on the verge of bursting out laughing as he saw Featherstorm basking in the attention and praise, the vain griffin lapping it all up as he followed along. "Well, now that your mount is settled—" "His mount's a griffin, not a horse, mother," Vivi exclaimed, exasperatedly. "Almost as important as Thane himself is. They're griffin riders, and amazing." She stared enviously at the retreating back of Featherstorm. "Perhaps you and Lorna should reacquaint yourselves while I'll deal with our guest," Lady Mistmantle said irritatingly. "I'm sure you can help her settle after her time on the road." Taking that as a dismissal it was, Vivi brightened up and trotted forward. Just slow enough she couldn't be accused of running, and grabbed Lady Crowley's hand and then grabbed mine. "Come on, you can come too," she said, tugging me along. I stared somewhat helplessly at Caden, though after a moment of listening to the irritating words of Lady Mistmantle, I decided I'd gotten the better side of things and accepted my fate. What was the worst that could happen? end up doing normal teenage girl things for once. The two happy girls let me follow them away from the castle and into the gardens on a terrace nearby. I marked that, while this was a military installation, it was still the prestigious home of a noble family. An estate, not a military base. "I could see as far as Emberstone Lake, Vivi," Lady Crowley said excitedly to her friend. "Much higher than we might have been able to see all the way to the capital, just from the air. Though seeing the city, everything was so small. The castle looked like a tiny dot of stone and I nearly missed it." "So lucky," Vivi mumbled, glancing enviously at Lady Crowley. "Did you see any fighting? Did Dame Tadbury show off her skills?" Lady Crowley shook her head. "No, we found them after Gwyneth and Fane Caden rescued them. There wasn't anything to fight." "Aw," Vivi pouted. "At this rate, we'll never get to see what the ex-royal guard can do," she said, scuffing her boot on the flagstones of the path. I felt incredibly out of place. If anything, I should have been taken to get cleaned up and shoved into something more presentable before being allowed to roam with the two girls. I knew there were two guards trailing us, discreetly, just far enough that the girls didn't notice and staying just out of sight of them, but the birds weren't singing right for no one to be back there. And I just felt like they were there. The plant life and structure of the garden wasn't wild. The spirit felt too domesticated and barely reacted at all to any of us. So that wasn't why I got that feeling. They wouldn't notice someone unless they started trampling over things. Which left, well, the animals. Or the wind. I'd figure it out eventually. And that's the story of how they saved them. Gwyneth healed them up afterwards. She's a mage. Or a witch, Lady Crowley said, finishing up her retelling of a second-hand story of what happened with the gnolls. "Nearly died killing the one I did," I muttered, still feeling Caden's praise wasn't really deserved. Gnolls aren't pushovers. Yet they were what Thomas joked about me being ready to take in a fight. Not that he'd ever seen a gnoll. He'd never gone more than a day's ride from Kiel Harbor in his life. "Really? She's a mage?" Vivi said, eyeing me for a moment before turning away and flicking her hand dismissively. "She's not even older than you." "That's what the Fane said," Lady Crowley said uncertainly. Vivi grinned. "Well, it's easy to prove." She reached out and pushed her thumb into the thorn of a rosebush, biting her lip and wincing against the pain. "Here, if you aren't a fraud, this should be easy for you to fix," she said, presenting her barely bleeding thumb out at me. It was sorely tempting to ignore the brat and leave her with a sting and tiny, minuscule little scratch and let her deal with the bleeding. So very tempting. But it would be stupidly petty. There were better ways. Keeping my face completely flat, I took her hand and lifted it up. Staring her dead in the eye, I licked her thumb. The tang of blood unpleasant, but the look of confusion and then disgust on her face so very worth it. "Done," I said, letting go. It hadn't even taken a second to heal. Done the moment I grabbed her hand. I didn't even need to grab her hand, really. The lick was spur of the moment and weird, but I was happy with the result. "If you wanted a demonstration, you could have just asked," I said dryly. "Ew," Vivi said, staring at her thumb. Lady Crowley at least seemed amused, not bothering to hide her smile as she peered at Vivi's thumb as well. "She did heal it, I think. It wasn't a big cut, was it?" "No, it really wasn't. Was barely even bleeding." I shook my head. The rosebush would actually be a perfect demonstration. They hadn't started to flower just yet, though they were budding. "Here, watch," I said, taking one of the buds and quickening its growth. The bud opened and fast forward, followed by petal after petal gently unfurling until a gorgeous red Ghanaian rose was in full bloom. Still feeling a bit mischievous, I popped the bloom off its stem, sealing up the damage behind me, and started weaving it into a simple imbuement of long-lasting life. And good health? Why not? Good health it was. I was still not good at it, by Celestine standards, but I was more than capable of making something simple. Didn't hold a candle to the pendant she had given me, but it was something. After a minute of slow humming and brushing the flower, the two watching with a mix of trepidation and curiosity as they whispered to each other, I was done. A single rose with a short vine stem and 2 green leaves framing the flower, that wouldn't wither for years on end, ever if properly cared for. Here you go, one enchanted rose for the Lady Crowley. I vaguely remembered Lady Crowley wore a rose in her hair, which made the idea of me giving her one, and maybe starting the habit, amusing to me. Lady Crowley held the flower for a moment, examining it. I expected her to ask about the magic, what it did, or some one question. Instead, she smiled sweetly at me. "Oh, is this a proposition? Father usually deals with my potential suitors. I'm not sure what he would think, and we've hardly known each other for a day." I stood there, speechless, my mouth opening but no sound coming out, as I registered what she had said. What? A proposal? Looking at the flower, the red rose I had given her, the flower that was the best known symbol of love, and even a prized Ghanaian rose that was sought after across the 7 kingdoms. I didn't... I sputtered, my cheeks heating up. Lady Crowley kept smiling at me, her eyes twinkling as she held the flower I gave her, with her shining hair just a little out of place from our ride on Featherstone's back end. I looked away, feeling mortified. "I'm sorry." Lady Crowley and Vivi both burst out into giggles. "Lorna, that was mean," Vivi said, not trying to stifle her amusement. "But just look at her, she thought you were serious." Realizing my own stupidity only made me feel worse, and I turned to leave, mumbling something vague about not wishing to bother them further, when Lady Crowley caught my arm. "No, do stay," she said. "I am sorry, but it was too difficult to pass up. Forgive me?" Lady Crowley asked, drawing me to look again. She looked and sounded sincere, and I knew my best friend from before would have done the exact same thing. I nodded and she smiled again, more real this time. "Thank you for the gift. It's a very nice rose." She worked it into her hair, using the stem I had left behind to secure it. "How do I look?" "Suits you," Vivi said immediately. "It's like you've got a bit of my hair in yours." She grinned, brushing a hand through her own long, vibrant red locks. Lady Crowley let go and stepped back, doing a little curtsy. "Lorna Crowley, but please call me Lorna." "Vivienne Mistmantle. Vivi for short, not Anne," Vivienne said, crossing her arms over her chest instead of curtsying. "Your magic was kinda cool. Not fireballs or anything, but still magic." She trailed off, looking thoughtful. "Gwyneth Arevin. Call me Gwen, and I'm a witch, like my mother and my cousin," I said. "Is there a reason you have a hole in your shirt?" Vivienne asked, earning a look from Lorna. "What? I've been wondering since I saw her." My hand went to my side. "That's where I got injured by a gnoll. The red is my blood." Vivienne stared for a moment before going a little pale. The tear, even patched, wasn't small. It was near half my shirt before, where the axe bit all the way into my side and... "Are you okay?" Lorna asked, her hand on my shoulder. I'd gone for my knife. "Bugger, no, do not do that, ever." "Yeah, sorry," I said, trying to play it off and not worry them. This was something I needed to speak to Caden about, not girls as young as these two. I gave my spare clothes to Kat, one of the girls we rescued. This was all I had. Well, that we can fix, Vivian said, nodding imperiously. Father sent for a new tailor after the last one died, and he moved in just 5 months back. I'm sure we can get you something new. That'd be nice, I said. Well, apparently I would end up doing something stereotypically teenage girl with them. Clothes shopping. Just probably not today. Before that though, I think I could do with a bath. Please tell me your castle has running water. Lorna grinned. It does, hot water and all. One thing Isabel did right was getting Tobias to install it. I can't imagine living without it. Thank the keepers, I mumbled. There was nothing realistic that I wanted more than a house with plumbing.